For a long time, the New Zealand Labour Party has lacked a clear identity. Labour once had a very strong identity. The first Labour government, the second Labour government, and the third Labour government all had a pretty clear identity. They were pro-worker, they were bold, and they strongly believed in social democracy. But in the 1980s, everything changed. The fourth Labour government embraced an extreme neoliberal agenda. The Minister of Finance was Roger Douglas, the founder of the ACT Party. Richard Prebble was a prominent minister. He would later lead the ACT Party. Labour was hijacked by right-wing economic reformers. They deregulated the economy, they sold state assets, they corporatised state assets, they cut taxes for the wealthy and introduced new taxes for the poor. They weakened the social democracy that their forebears had built, and they left the identity of the Labour Party in tatters. Many of Labour's supporters fled. They joined different parties or just gave up on politics altogether. Labour had completely abandoned its preceding identity. What followed was decades of identity crisis. Labour initially tried to reinvent itself as a third-way party, to the left of National, but still very right-wing on many economic issues. This was the approach taken by Mike Moore. Helen Clark watered this down somewhat. Under Helen Clark, the party prioritised competent management of the status quo, with some reforms thrown in. The bold pro-worker Labour Party that believed in transformational reforms was dead. But the independent foreign policy remained, and the party still leant left. Probably the one positive from this period was the rise of social progressivism. Labour became a lot more socially progressive. This started in the 1980s and has continued to the present day. The party was once home to a large number of conservatives, but now the progressives dominate. This identity change is partly a result of the decline of the industrial working class. This forced Labour to appeal to new constituencies, namely educated middle-class liberals. Still, the identity of the Labour Party remained shaky. When Helen Clark and Michael Cullen left the Labour Party, it struggled badly to reshape its image. And even during the height of Ardern's popularity, it was not that obvious what the Labour Party actually represented. Rhetoric was often radical, but policy was often moderate. Neoliberalism and capitalism were aggressively criticised, but even a simple capital gains tax was not introduced. The government lacked direction, policies were picked up and discarded like old toys. The government wasted a lot of its political capital on policies that nobody cared about, which got abandoned anyway. The RNZ merger, the hate speech laws, and free waters being some major examples. And the government's communication was appalling, as they have admitted. Their failure to effectively communicate on issues such as free waters and co-governance led to these policies being despised. And then in 2023, they ran an uninspiring election campaign that was utterly devoid of vision. Labour has been suffering from an identity crisis since the 1980s, and this identity crisis is yet to be resolved. Labour needs to adopt a strong identity, a strong position in common association. National is closely associated with tax cuts and good economic management. Of course, this is misleading, but this is the identity of the National Party. What is the identity of the Labour Party? Being mildly pro-worker? Labour lacks a strong and coherent identity. This is a very serious issue. Many people vote based simply on identity. What values they associate with a party. Labour needs to create a stronger identity. A pro-worker, anti-corruption identity could be extremely beneficial. especially in a world where people are increasingly frustrated by elites and inequalities. The left can exploit the populist era, but somehow the right is winning even though they have always served the elites. It is a weird thing. The left should be capitalising on the anti-elite era. If Labour revitalises its identity, perhaps the left can still triumph. We shall see.